It's a degradation of the word enlightenment and the tradition that is, we know, famously begun by Buddha. It's a shame on his experience for people to take definitions and insights as equivalent to enlightenment experiences. And you should not fall into that error. It is a major error. Now, frankly, there's two ways out of it. One is to develop the capacity to determine what an enlightenment experience is, which is primarily done by your own experiences. So, and to be able to see that in someone else. In terms, when I say see, I mean that in quotes, to become conscious of it in someone else. That takes both of those abilities. One is to have had the subjective experience yourself, and that leads to the capacity to detect this in another. Now we're going to try to teach this in this course. It's not that easy, but I'll show you the magic technique as we go along through the course. Secondly, there's another way to solve the problem, and that is to not make the determination. That'll make you a weaker master if you can't tell. But you can do Enlightenment Intensive. Enlightenment Intensive is so powerful. The technique and the format are so powerful that people will get enlightened anyway, even if you can't tell. So, you have that as an out. It'll make you a little weaker as a master because you won't know when to let them off the hook. Say they've taken on trying to experience who they are. Well, if you can't tell when they've experienced who they are, you're liable to say, all right, that's good enough. Then go on to say a question like, what is life? And they've had an insight, say. And they accept that as an enlightenment experience. Then they go on and become an enlightenment master or give enlightenment intensives, and the whole thing is compounded because they'll accept that, and the degradation process has begun even in this generation. Now you could cover your tracks by saying, well, I'm letting you go to this other question. But it's not saying that you've had an enlightenment experience. But then what if they have had? And you couldn't tell. Then you've cast your uncertainty over the social situation of enlightenment. It won't change their experience one way or the other. Your comment doesn't change whether it was an insight or whether it was an enlightenment experience. But it makes it more difficult to communicate for them. Especially if they have any respect for you. And you're being put into an elevated position by leading an Enlightenment Intensive. I debated long and hard whether it should be called master or not. Finally settled, yes, it should be. And these people should be well enough trained so they know what they're doing. So you need to know, one, what is enlightenment, and two, how to detect that state in another. Not an easy requirement. In fact, it's the most difficult part of the course. That's why I decided to start with that. The mechanics of the course you can learn. And you can even pick up by some practice some skill in those methods and techniques and familiarity. But one thing that we'll have to work very hard on is, one, understanding the definition of enlightenment, and two, having a subjective certainty on it. Now, of course, the best thing to do is have an enlightenment experience yourself. Once you've had that, and it really was an enlightenment experience, half the battle is won. Nevertheless, I'll still give you a verbal definition of enlightenment. It's impossible to define. It's like trying to define samadhi. Can't be done. But we can take some words that point in that direction that have some value. I've used direct experience. Direct experience as the definition of enlightenment. A direct experience of anything. Doesn't matter what it is of. It could be of a rock, then you'd be rock enlightened. If it was a tree, it'd be tree enlightenment. Now, if it was of self, it would be self-enlightenment. So, what kind of enlightenment is dependent on what the direct experience has had of. So now we get down to understanding what is direct experience. And that's tough because the word experience itself denies what we're trying to say. Now, I'm not going to pull punches on you people here. Enlightenment Intensive, I try to water it down because you have people off the streets or taking their first Enlightenment Intensives and things like that. But let's not shy away from trying to understand metaphysical concepts here. If you could have an experience that was not an experience, but nevertheless ended up with what it was, then this would be enlightenment type experience. And so it's not really an experience at all, because an experience is always a process. It's something that takes place. When you look at the wall, there's this process of seeing. There's light bouncing off the wall, it goes into the eye, it's focused on the retina, the nerve cells in the retina feed the information into the brain, and it's passed around through 4 or 5 subcenters of the brain, and it ends up in the interpretive center as some kind of a visualization of the wall. It's a process. Looking at the wall is not a direct experience. You're experiencing the wall through the process of seeing. Let's see now, what could a wall be? You go through this reasoning process. Well, if a wall, I've been told it has acts as some kind of a barrier, and I know what barriers are like, therefore a wall must be like that, except that it's a material thing, so it's a barrier that's made out of stuff, and so that you come to a conclusion of what the wall is. It's a process. Logical thinking, reasoning, remembering. These are indirect experiences, by the way I've defined the term. Let's see if we can get one that's very close to no process. This is the one I like to use, which is like the house that you live in, you know where the bathroom is. I hope you do. Do you have to go through a process? Maybe you went through a process to find out. But now that you've got it, you've got it. You know where the bathroom is. You don't have to think, now see, now I'm going to remember. Let's see, you go down the hallway and to the left. You don't go through that, do you? You know where the bathroom is. Also, you don't have to now figure it out. Now, logically, this is the living room, and I can see a door there, so it must be, when you first get in a house, you have to go through that sometime. Or you could ask somebody else. That's another process. They say, well, who am I? Well, you tell me. Oh, now I know who I am. Huh? Well, if you can really accept it, it would be all right, and then you still have to go in the bathroom. Just because you know where it is still doesn't give you the direct experience of the bathroom. You still have to go in the bathroom. But you know where it is. And you don't now have to go through a process of working out where the bathroom is. Although you went through a process to get there, now you're in this state of processlessness. Huh? You just know where the bathroom is, like you know what your name is. I hope. You don't have to remember. Let's see now. Now, it's akin to that kind of a thing. In Sanskrit, the word anu means after. Bhava means what it actually is, the thing itself experienced or consciousness of it. So after you found out what it is and you're in this state, it's called anubhava. There's no word for it in English for enlightenment, that is without experience. So what do we mean by the word direct then? That means no process. The experience takes place, but there is no experiencing. Now, you could have a lot of experiences right up to this state of affairs of enlightenment. It can be touching, having it in your emotions, having mental images, concepts, and they may even be correct, but they're not direct. Even having come to the correct, clear-minded concept of something is not enlightenment. And watch that one closely. A clear-minded concept of something is not enlightenment. In the state of enlightenment, there is no difference between that which one is enlightened on and the one who is enlightened. There's no difference. It's them. It and them are the same. There's no separation. And there's no sense of having come into that experience. It is inapplicable to it. In other words, the process which one has been going through is no longer applicable. It is no longer a sense of having arrived at it. It is the absolute itself. And that is them. There's no difference between them and it. In yoga, it is called samadhi. Union with it, with no sense that now I'm in union with it. As long as there's a sense of, well, I'm in union with it, that's not enlightenment. We are one. There's not any time sense that now I know what I didn't know before. It's that I've always known. I just didn't know I knew. It's just what is. It's not a matter of having found out. It's the eternal truth itself. When they have it in that sense, then you have enlightenment. You can't go by symptoms. Now, there are symptoms that go along with the enlightenment experience, but you can't go by symptoms. To determine what is enlightenment. Sometimes there's all kinds of flashy side effects that occur with enlightenment experience. Sometimes there aren't any at all. And you can't go by verbal answers, because anybody can learn the answers. I can give you all the answers in 10 seconds. That doesn't make you enlightened. And it doesn't make them not enlightened. And not knowing the words doesn't mean they haven't had an enlightenment experience. It means they just can't talk about it very well. Which is another project which we'll be talking about extensively. Then how can you tell? Through no process at all. In other words, the same way that you have an enlightenment experience yourself is how you can tell whether someone else has had an enlightenment experience. So there's no how to it at all. Having a direct experience of another tells you whether they're in a state of direct experience. So the only way you can tell, actually, whether somebody is enlightened or not is having a direct experience of them. There's no other way to be sure about it. In fact, there's no other way to be sure about anything anytime except by enlightenment, because everything else is just has an element of doubt and an element of certainty in it. So it's a difficult skill to teach.